been almost a year since I've had you on Filmspiration, and so for those out in Filmspiration land who are not familiar with you, can you give me a very brief description, who you are, your background, and what you're up to?
Okay, well, I am Lee Campbell, also known around Tucson as Jonni, and I am an actress and model and producer, and I am on the process of co-founding a new organization, Differently Abled Entertainment, that will help differently abled people acquire skills and equipment needed to join the entertainment industry. That's
Awesome, Jonni. So let's go ahead and jump into that topic right away. First and foremost, talk to me about differently abled entertainment, and then also, even before that, talk to me about the term differently abled versus another term that most people are used to using.
Yes, I like the term differently abled as opposed to disabled. I have been in a wheelchair from a spinal cord injury for a little over 20 years now. And it's just something that I've never liked the term disabled, because even though like my legs might not work, there's still a lot of things that I'm still capable of doing. And so this group is to kind of help shine a light on, the abilities and the talents that those of us that are differently abled still have. And that is our hope, is, to give differently abled persons a platform and an opportunity to showcase their talents.
Now, Jonni, talk to me about that platform, which is here in Tucson, as you've established differently abled entertainment. Talk to me about the need for a platform like this for differently abled people, because I imagine that there is a need, and differently abled folks in the arts and entertainment realm are very underserved, I can imagine.
Yeah, actually, around 20% of Americans are disabled in some form, and only 2% of that is ever represented in film and TV. And less than half of those roles are portrayed by people that are actually differently abled. A lot of times you see an able-bodied person portraying a differently abled individual. This whole goal of our group is, giving people the confidence and encouragement, and we're hoping, to be able to work with writers and stuff to give people, a chance to really show what they're capable of doing, and work with what you have, and you can really, you'd be amazed with some of the things that you can do. And so that's kind of our goal here, is just, that's where it's myself and Michael Ray, a close friend of mine who's also a below the knee amputee. And so, it's a paraplegic and an amputee, and we both know how much of a struggle it is to find roles and to find directors and producers and people casting, people that are willing to give you that opportunity, because there's so many roles that aren't geared for differently abled people. So
And Jonni, so just to go into that, right before our signal cut off,
yeah.
Talk to me about the need for differently abled people to have a platform like Differently Abled Entertainment, for that exposure, for that confidence building circle of people around them. Because as we were saying before the signal cut out, I can only imagine how underserved of a population the differently abled population is in the arts and entertainment industry.
Yeah, as I was saying before I cut out, it's only 2% of the roles that you see in film and TV are, for somebody that is differently abled. And as I was saying, it's less than half of those roles that are actually portrayed by somebody that is differently abled, instead of an able-bodied actor portraying somebody that is differently able. And, it would just, and in some cases it makes sense. Sometimes you have an actor who has an injury and then recovers, or they have flashbacks. And so you want to be able to see that same person being able to be able-bodied and being able to not be. And so in those instances, I do understand why a director would want an able-bodied person to portray that person. However, in the other cases where it's always that person is just always in a chair, or that person is supposed to be an amputee, or any of those instances, it would be nice to start seeing actual people that fit those descriptions be put in those roles.
Jonni, one of the things that I'm always discussing with a lot of other filmmakers is, okay, so in this case, differently abled people and roles, right? Is it about a film company or a movie company coming up with a role to put a differently abled person in there, or is it about basically a differently abled person trying to fill a non-differently abled role? Because as a person who's written and directed myself, I mean, a lot of times I will look at a person, their personality, their traits, their strengths, their weaknesses, and whether or not it's discussed, I will write those into the character. And then, oftentimes, a lot of times, the actors or actresses that then read those roles say, oh my God, this is me. And I said, that's why I wrote it that way, because you can lock into interpreting that character that much more. Talk to me a little bit about that, what you see and what you would like to see with regards to creating.
Well, what you were saying, I have been lucky to work with directors and writers who were willing to put me in roles that weren't written necessarily for somebody in a chair, but because of my personality or because of my acting abilities, they saw fit that I could still portray the character. And so, yes, I'd like to see that happen more. Because also what we see is it's constantly like a little bit of a regurgitated story when it comes to differently abled person's stories that you see in film and TV. It's usually their recovery story, their injury story, some sort of inspiration story. It's never just like a real person, an everyday person in their everyday life, which that is also something that we would like to hopefully gear towards a change is, yes, I might be a woman in a wheelchair, but that doesn't always have to be the story that I play. Yeah. I could just be a normal person who happens to be in a wheelchair. It doesn't have to be the first thing that people see, or the first story that they hear. It would be interesting to be in a film where I am in my chair, but nobody knows why or how I even got there. It has nothing to do with the storyline. I'm just a woman in a chair, and this is a story about whatever it may be about. And it has nothing to do with an injury or the recovery or any of that. It just kind of goes with where a person is in their life at that moment, because like for me, like I said, it's been over 20 years. So, my life has taken a lot of twists and turns since then. And, most people who know me and who are close to me, they don't see me as a girl in a wheelchair. They see me as John Lee. Yeah. They see me for the person that I am. And I'm lucky to have that support, but it would be nice to have that portrayed more in film and TV, where somebody could be in a chair or walk with crutches or, whatever the case may be. And it's never really talked about why or quote unquote, what's wrong with them. It's just who they are.
I think I recently saw this movie Lady Bird from 2017, I think it was. And so you've got a majority white family, right? But then they do have a son who's, I think he's Asian or Hispanic, right? And then he's got a girlfriend who's African American, right? But there's never any explanation as to why that is. And so it's just accepted without that being the focus or focus of explanation within that story. Is that what you're trying to communicate? That basically you would like to see things like, for example, you have a character in a wheelchair, but that's not what the story is about. It's just an accepted aspect of that character.
Exactly. I would like to see more of that. And I think other, differently abled people would like to see themselves represented. I don't in a more humanistic way, other than that always that stereotypical way that we're normally represented in film and TV. I think all of us would really like to just see more of just, yeah, this is just who they are, and we don't really need to know the background too much.
Yeah.
It's not important to the here and now.
Jonni, just to close out on this topic, because I actually want to segue into the next one. What do you say to all of the writers and the directors, even here locally, with regards to when they're sitting down to write that script? What do you say to them with regards to taking differently disabled? I'm sorry, let me try that again. Oh my God, this coffee's not kicking. Okay. Let's try take two on that. What do you say to those writers and directors, even here locally, when they're sitting down to write that script, when taking into account or that they should be taking into consideration differently abled people into a storyline?
Well, I think right now everywhere, the fact that the whole movement as representation matters is a huge thing right now, and I think writers everywhere are trying to be more conscious about including um, diversity in their films and in their writing. And so, yeah, I just, as they're starting to include everyone, hopefully they will think to include the differently abled community as well, because there are plenty of talented people out there just waiting for an opportunity to be able to showcase their talents.